Awesome. What a love fest. What a vibe fest. Love it here. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming back after lunch. Room is still pretty full, which is great to see. I just want to say thank you to the BRIC team for inviting me to moderate this panel and just be a part of this really amazing community. I admire these women so much and the work that they do. They really are get shit done people, as they say. And so it's just, I've been introduced to the organization maybe 4 years ago now, and just to see what they've done in that time is just remarkable. So very honored and privileged to be here. So thank you. I am Alicia Hines, the Director of Research at the UCLA Center for Scholars and Storytellers. I'm also on the BRIC board. Thank you. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. Just here to moderate my illustrious panelists. I will introduce, because I mean, as you can see, this is a panel of women of color, which I am very excited about. And I do believe that women of color should deserve to be introduced. So, but I'll be quick. So first, our first panelist, Carolyn Mathis, head of people and Aperna Pictures. Carolyn Mathis is a strategic people officer with over 29 years of experience in human resources and organizational development. As the former chief people and culture officer of Shondaland Incorporated, Carolyn oversaw the strategic direction of the organization's people functions, facilities, and office services departments. Carolyn has over 28 years of experience in all areas of people and culture, change management strategies, DEIA and B, L&D compensation and benefits. Yes. Next. Yes. My fellow Bruin, Dr. Ana Cristina Ramon is the inaugural director of the Entertainment and Media Research Initiative at UCLA. Dr. Ramon is a social psychologist who's worked on social justice issues related to equity and access in higher education and the entertainment industry for 2 decades. As the founding director of EMRI, she manages the research initiative, which produces the UCLA Hollywood Diversity Report and additional research projects on entertainment and media. She also co-edited a book with Dr. Darnell Hunt titled Black Los Angeles, American Dreams and Racial Realities. Hey. We are also joined today by Fan Shen Cox. I'm just a fan. We just met, but I'm such a fan. Award-winning playwright, actor, producer, and educator, Fan Shen Cox is the DEIA manager for the California Film Commission's Tax Credit Program. She is also the founder of Trujillo Productions. I think I said that right. She's been honored with distinguished alumni awards from CSULA and from Teachers College, Columbia University, and an honorary MFA in producing from New York Film Academy. Fan Shen is also a co-author of The Inclusion Writer, which was announced at the 2018 Oscar Awards by Frances McDormand, as we know, and the co-creator. Cox is also the co-creator, producer, and host of the Webby-nominated podcast, Sister Brunch. Wonderful. I'm also laughing because Allison talked earlier about like speaking extemporaneously, and I'm up here with like notebooks, papers, but I won't read at you, but I'm a former professor, so I'm always gonna have some notes, like always. And the way my ADHD is set up, like you want me to have something to focus on. So anyway, thank you all. So we'll get started with opening some questions to you all. I'm hoping that this conversation isn't as scary as like systems change. You know, it's just more conversational, kind of grounding us in some research and giving us some hope as we move forward in this work. You all move forward in the important work that you do, and we can keep collaborating together to make it through the next 4 years and beyond. So we also are holding a lot, I think, in our minds right now, at least I am, from this day. There's been such rich conversations and panels, and I also don't have to rehearse to you kind of where we are in the world, right? Like pullbacks from, you know, funding for DEI, disinvestment in DEI from the government and corporations, and needing to kind of comply with new federal directives. So we kind of know the kind of dread and the doom and gloom of it all. So we're kind of think about, you know, the strategies that we can implement to work through those things. And I think hopefully this conversation about the research and some of the initiatives that these women have been working on will help us get there. So my first question will be posed just to the whole group. all of you have many, many years of experience doing this work, and I'm trained as a historian, so it's always important for me to think about, sorry, I feel like my back's to you. It's always important for me to think about what's come before, right? Like a lot of this is not new. A lot of this, we've seen conservative backlash before. We've seen these kinds of things. So in your careers, how have you kind of seen these conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion shift? Some of those highlight, moments or key takeaways that you've taken from your careers to kind of help us better understand where we are right now.
Well, let me say that that's a great question, number one. In terms of what I've seen in terms of shifts and things of that nature over the years, we know most recently DEI, it has been trendy, right? And then everyone felt like, okay, we need to get some type of program strategies and so forth together, which is great, but those things were important before it became a thing. Right? And so leading up to that point, I think people putting in place just the conversations about how important it is, and also having some type of strategies and numbers around how does that make an organization more effective has led to the point where it became a trend. And because these things are happening in our world today, doesn't mean that we stop, right? Because there are laws that say you can't do this or you can't do that, you still move forward with your business. You still do what you have to do. That was happening before there were laws in place. Laws are in place because something happened. And so then there's a law that sparks. Doesn't mean that we stop what we're doing. In my opinion, and being at Shondaland especially, we leaned further into it, knowing that some of these struggles were happening already, right? And so we continue at Annapurna too, now that I'm there at Annapurna, to talk about and have these conversations around what is it that we need to do to make sure that we're still having programs, that we're still building strategies, that we have people in place that look like and represent the world. So if anything, it doesn't stop. You lean further into it because these laws are here to decrease that or eliminate those things. So yes, it's changed over time, but it doesn't stop the effort. So I would encourage everyone to still move forward in making sure that you're doing in the hiring, you're looking at the world in which you live in and say, well, this person isn't represented, or these things are not represented, so we need to have these things here. It's a normal part of a process to want to have, around you the way the world looks. And so that's what you continue to do, and think creatively about how you put those things in place. Definitely need the right partners. But
so I can't do this without, first of all, acknowledging an incredibly important person who is helping me learn about how to make systems change, which is Leah Medrano, and she's the Deputy Director of the California Film Commission. Another badass woman of color, if I may say.
Amen.
Cut that out. So, okay. And also our executive director, Colleen Bell. So to take it back to the inclusion rider, right? 2018, Frances McDormand says it. We weren't ready. I created it with Stacy Smith and Kalpana Kodagal. And we didn't know it was going to happen. We didn't know she was going to say it, but we just all kind of activated, right? We're like, let's go, let's go. There was so much excitement behind it, and then little by little, all those folks who said they were going to use it, suddenly it turned into something else. So they were saying, oh, we're using an inclusion rider, not the inclusion rider, because we had things like accountability measures built in, and they were like, oh, we're not going to do that part, but we're going to make a lot of promises, right? 2020 comes around, and then folks start reaching back out. That was a great opportunity to then work with Color of Change and with Endeavor Content, and we all created a new version, so we kind of had a 2.0 for companies, because the original one was individuals like Matt Damon and Ben Affleck was working with kind of A-listers who had that kind of power, but this 2.0 was, what if the company itself commits to this process of inclusive hiring? And still, what I started to realize was that when the only work you're doing is at that level where you're pushing the powerful folks, the folks that have traditionally been empowered to make the change, things don't happen as quickly as we all want to. So really the change is about empowering us, empowering the filmmakers, empowering the content creators, the animators, empowering us. So then I got to apply for this job. First of all, I was raised by hippies, so how I ended up working for the government, I don't understand. But this job came along, and it turned out that in program 4.0, which is the tax credit program, so the program runs every 5 years. The current version is sunsetting in June. The new version starts in July, and the legislators built in accountability measures for DEIA best practices, which means that beginning in July, productions that get tax credits are going to have to walk through a process that me and my team and Leah and Colleen are all going to kind of look through, measure their process and determine whether they get their full tax credits. So they will only get we gonna clap for this because this is big. It's the only one. I'll say productions will get 96% of their tax credit allocation if they either opt out of doing this process or they found to not meet good faith efforts. So I have to say, even in this space where things are feeling scary, that at a state level, and there's been so much talk about let the states decide, okay, fantastic, we're gonna stay right in this state right here and continue this work here. So I'm really excited about the work moving forward, and I would love to talk to each and every one of you. The last thing I'll say is that in that realm of then empowering the filmmakers, Leah and I have created tax credit application information sessions. So we will take you by the hand and walk you through how to apply for tax credits in California, because for far too long, we felt like it was scary, we had imposter syndrome around it, and you can do it, you can do it. So I'm happy to I'll take every single one of y'all and walk you through this process. So I'm excited.
Awesome, yes. And put a pin in that. We will definitely come back to that. Okay. Before you answer, Dr. Ramon, I'm just going to kind of add a little bit to the question for you. How many people are familiar with the Hollywood Diversity Report? Yes, yes. Incredible report. I think over 10 years now.
Since 2014.
Since 2014. So I want to have you also, in response to that question, talk about kind of what you've seen through the Hollywood Diversity Report over the years, and then the shift to the streaming TV report that came out at the end of last year as well, and some of those key findings and takeaways. You can also look in your program materials, and you should have a handout that should give you some highlights about the new Hollywood Diversity Report.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, if you go back to 1998, 1999, that I was not involved yet in this research, but taking us back there, you find that there was a memorandum of understanding that was signed between the major networks and studios and the racial and ethnic advocacy organizations. And that was because of the fact that there wasn't enough representation in terms of race and ethnicity, in film and television. And so there was a demand for it. So what happened is that there was diversity officers that were created that at those major studios and networks that signed on, and there was an agreement that the data would be passed along to these advocacy organizations so that they could see how well the studios were doing. Well, what you find now is that all those diversity officers are completely gone because all the studios and networks have changed, in terms of merging, and they didn't even last probably. By the time that we started doing our research in 2011, they were almost all gone, those diversity officers that had been put in place because of that memorandum of understanding. This is just to show how long this process has taken. But what happened is that in terms of the data, what the studios were doing is that they were passing along data that just made them look good. So they would tell the advocacy organizations, oh, well, we have these shows, and it was like comparing apples to oranges. And my co-author, co-researcher, Dr. Darnell Hunt, was called upon to help with the analysis, and he saw that it was just all over the place. And even though the organizations decided to move ahead and grade the studios and networks, it was difficult because they didn't have standardized data. So around 2010, we wanted to pursue this area in terms of really understanding what was going on in the industry in terms of race and ethnicity. At the time, nobody else was really studying race and ethnicity. There was a lot of gender studies, which obviously were very necessary, but a really focus on race and ethnicity at that level, unlike those report card reports that were coming out from the organizations, there wasn't that much. So when we went around and we talked to the diversity executives that were working at the time, one of them told us, nobody's going to really care about this unless you connect it to the bottom line. So we thought, challenge accepted, like, let's look into this. What is going on in terms of which shows are most popular, which films are most successful at the box office. And so that's how, when we first came out with our first study in 2014, our longitudinal data started in 2011, and we looked at film and TV shows. And since that first report, we found that diversity is profitable, right? That even at the time when we started looking at it in 2011, there was such a small percentage share of diverse shows, diverse films, but those actually did perform the best when you looked at the median box office, the median ratings. And so we just continued to track it, and through the years, we saw that it continued to improve, and slightly, but that each time that finding became even stronger, right? And so in 2018 was the first year that in our study that we found that there was that the majority, there were casts that were pretty much all white, were finally not the majority of films. And that was in 2018, it was the first time, and we actually then found that films that actually had a majority BIPOC cast were finally the plurality. And in that year, Black Panther came out and Crazy Rich Asians. And that 2018, not adjusting for inflation, still stands as the most profitable domestic box office that has been recorded to date, right? So you can see then, with our study that this is, something that people want to see, because even, as time has passed in the U.S. population, people of color are increasing every year, right? And so the way that, things are done with this very much, outdated perspective is completely doesn't work, because there's more and more of the audience are people of color, and they don't want to see just the same old. And so in terms of stories and really looking at writers, obviously, and the types of stories, what we found is that when we were doing our traditional TV study that looked at broadcast, cable, and streaming, we were finally able to have enough credited writers throughout a season that we could do this analysis where we looked at if a show had a certain percentage of credited writers of color, how well did those shows do? And we found that those shows did better when they had more credited writers on their staff that were writing throughout the season. And so when we did this last TV study that came out in December, you can hopefully find it on one of the links that's online.
QR code.
We, for the first time, looked at the shows, and we were looking at streaming shows in 2023, and we were looking at library titles and current titles. And what we found is that the shows that included underrepresented stories, and those were BIPOC stories, women-centered stories, and LGBTQ stories, those did the best in terms of ratings. And so again, it just shows that the increasingly diverse audiences want to see diversity on screen.
Yes, thank you. I thought we were gonna have a little more time than this, but it's but no, such a important conversation, and it's something we can continue. But so the way I'm gonna do this is kind of ask you to a similar question. So Carolyn, in terms of your experience at Annapurna and Shondaland, you've seen kind of behind the scenes what it takes to create inclusive content, right? And then Fanchen, your work with the California Film Commission, you also see kind of this nuts and bolts behind the scenes of how the incentives work to, advance these diversity efforts, and then also some of those barriers to indie film creators and things like that. So I'm wondering if you could both kind of speak to the biggest takeaways and kind of what you've learned from your experience trying to get this stuff made, right? And like trying to make it happen, and then just some lessons that we can take away from this room.
Well, personally, when I was at Shondaland, we started a program called the Ladder Program. And the Ladder Program allowed for us to really bring in people of color, as well as whether it was above the line or below the line. And because there wasn't anyone working, who behind the scenes that really understood how to do someone's hair, black hair, so we didn't have the makeup artists, we didn't have the hairstylists, and we looked around and saw that these people didn't exist when we were doing Bridgerton, the first episode of Bridgerton. And especially in the UK too, there weren't a lot of people behind the scenes that were people of color, and we needed that because we said, at least Shonda said, that we want to make sure that our world is represented here, and it should be as normal as the world works. And so if we're to have people of color, or not only people of color, but from diverse backgrounds, a person with a disability, LGBTQ, if we're to have those storylines, then we have to have people behind the scenes that represent those people as well, right? We have to have the writers in the room, who understand those stories. And it just really was at first, it was very difficult to get people to buy into how effective it could be, especially it being the first show in the UK. And so we push for it. And, again, as I say, you have to have a great partner that really believes in you and believes that this is beneficial, and it believes in your mission. And so when we partnered with Netflix, they definitely opened the door and said, do what you think is best. And so from the first episode through now the fourth, or the first season through the fourth season, we've seen that it changed so much. It looks completely different behind the scenes. And as I said before, with other conversations, is that most people didn't even realize, in the third season, we had someone who, a person who was hearing impaired, right? We had someone who was had a physical disability and was in a wheelchair. Most people didn't even realize that because it's a part of the world, right? And so and until you called it out, it's like, yeah, you know, that person did exist. So it was difficult at first, but when you start seeing the benefits of the success of all of those things, people wanted to see that. People gravitated to those kind of storylines to think and say, oh, well, you know, a person of color did exist during that time period. What if, you know, they married a king? What if?
We're always here. We've been here.
Right.
We've been here, yeah.
We didn't just pop up, like, just pop up, you know, just pop up in the 60s, like, we've always been here, like, you know. And so we were very, you know, we were very passionate about making sure that those stories existed and people saw those stories, and they were able to engage in it, interact with those stories, and see it also. So it's not only, you know, it affected people of color, which it did a lot, but it also affected just our world, right? The amount of impact that we all have. Everybody's story is important. Right? Everybody's story is important. When you are able to write about those stories, when you have some influence over those stories, everybody benefits. Everybody benefits. So in answering your question, how difficult it was difficult at first. We had to keep pushing for it and had to keep having the conversation. The conversation didn't die. And that's what you have to be passionate about, is making sure that if you have that, if that is important to you, which I think it should be important to everybody, no matter what your color, creed, religion, whatever the case may be, then you have to keep pushing for it. And you have to find the right partners to do it. And you have to have the vision to do it too. And I think now, because we're seeing these kind of stories, we're seeing more people who have that vision. So hopefully that answered your question.
Absolutely, absolutely. I won't interrupt. Go ahead.
Yes. Yes. Some exciting things that are happening is, so I think it was earlier this week or last week, we announced that an unprecedented number of projects were accepted into the tax credit program. First time ever, yes. And what's really exciting about that is that a number of those are independent films. So we have this category that's $1 to $10 million, and a lot of those are independent films. And as Cord Jefferson said when he won his Academy Award, like, maybe instead of giving $100 million for one film, what if we get, right? This is the idea is, and when they are independent films, we know from research that those tend to already have the inclusion built in. So that's one of the things that's just so exciting to see the benefits and the fruit of teaching folks how to apply for tax credits. Break down all those barriers. I, as an independent producer, never even looked at the California Film Commission website. I invite you all, please, to look at it. Also, it just felt intimidating. It felt like it just wasn't something for me. We are very friendly, I will say, honestly. Even the analysts who are kind of looking through the applications, determining, we have an objective system. It's also not a lottery, which also was, still I hear people saying it's a lottery. It's not. It is about jobs creation. So we have a jobs ratio ranking that determines. So it's all about how many Californians you're hiring. So all of that has been really exciting. And then on the regulations end, we are seeing this as an opportunity to work with studios, to work with those higher budget productions, and we don't think of that 4% as this kind of like shaming you or pointing fingers. We feel strongly that everybody is going to get that full 100%. They're just going to go through a process, right, where we're looking at implicit bias. We're asking you to reflect on your hiring practices. So we have a goal setting. All productions have to begin by setting some goals in a work plan. And then they do an interim assessment just before principal photography, where we're looking at what barriers are there for you for those goals that you set set in that work plan. And then they do a final report once they hand in all of their final materials. And so we are offering lots of support in this. This is not just about you go ahead and do this and then we're going to tell you whether or not you get these tax credits. It's we have all these touch points. We have an orientation with you. We're available all the time. So we're seeing this as like really teamwork, and we're also seeing that working as well.
Yeah. Awesome, awesome. You have so much to take from these amazing women on stage, and oh yeah, absolutely. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just wanted to just add in terms of the audience and kind of future looking, and I think that this also might be a message that kind of touches upon animation. We do a separate report the past few years on top streaming films. And the past few years, the top streaming films have been Encanto, Moana, and Turning Red. So a story about a Latina girl, a young Asian girl, and a young Polynesian girl.
Come on, come on.
There is no prince that comes to save them. They're all dealing with their family issues, right?
Yes.
That they resolve. And so the idea that right now the country has majority BIPOC kids, so under 18, that population is already majority BIPOC. So the idea that in like 5 years, these kids are gonna grow up and come and be fine with just only films with white men is, you know, completely, right, misguided and ridiculous. Yeah, and so it's like that's definitely, I think, something that you can push back on, right? So kids are already making their own content, and they're already seeing themselves. So when studios and networks think that, oh, well, you know, they'll just continue to buy another Tom Cruise pick. I mean, you know, watch another Harrison Ford, you know, film. No, these kids are like, I don't need to watch this. You know, why would I like have to pay for this? I'm just gonna, you know, continue watching my YouTube videos and creating my own content. So that is like something I think that is definitely important to remember, that the future, like I've been saying, the future is now. It's like this is the time to continue to push.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Before I formally wrap up. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, yes. Q&A. Yes, sorry. I forgot about that. My bad. Okay. Yes, please ask questions, and we'll be here. I think we have another like 15, 20 minutes. So is there a microphone, or do I need to go? I got it. Awesome. Thank you, Nicole.
Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for your time. I wanted to ask, I mean, obviously in recent months, we've seen with the rollbacks at the federal government level and the corporate response to it, what I've noticed is that there's so much misinformation about what DEIA stands for, right? And we've seen this myth that meritocracy is at odds with diversity and inclusion, and that's perpetuated. And I'm so baffled by that, because for the last DEIA has, for the past 5 years, has never had as big of a platform as it did in the last 5 years, and that's obviously gone away. So I'd like to know, like, what is behind that that misinformation about what these principles really are? I mean, obviously, you know, Dr. Ramon, like, you've been doing this report. Your data is consistent. The takeaways are very consistent. You know, why are these takeaways not being applied? So, A, what's behind the misinformation? And secondly, how can, you know, since this is about correcting the framing, you know, how can we as individuals in the room help to push back against or correct this kind of framing in this landscape that has shifted and has become hostile to these ideals? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a good question. Thanks, Rebecca. It's just part of creating culture wars that create this divide, right? So, twisting any words, and, you know, as you mentioned, that just saying DEI or DEIA, whatever, that is a way that they have a code, you know, for saying anything that is pretty much like not supporting white supremacy, basically, right? So like, when I see framing in the news of like, well, we're gonna erase all, people of color from websites, and that's anti-DEI. No, that's just racism. It's right. It's being pro-discriminatory, pro-segregation. That's not anti-DEI. And so, that's just, I think, ways for them to get around it, right? So that they're not saying diversity, equity, and inclusion. And even like when they do those surveys that they've asked people, regardless of race, they all say, yeah, diversity sounds pretty good. Yeah, let's, and so it's like, the population isn't against it. It's just like the way that they framed it really to kind of push an agenda, right? And so that's why I think it's important to push back on that. And I was even asked, like I did this guest lecture for a business school a month ago, and I was asked like, well, why don't you change your report title? Are you worried, about what's going on? And I said, no, because my report's been called this Hollywood Diversity Report. So first of all, it's kind of like branding. And why would I change it? Because, when the word diversity is not a negative word, right? It's like I have like changing it would be me giving into this idea, right? When, again, it's all about framing the narrative, right? And so I think that for obviously, recent times, people on, like our side that are supposed to be representing us, they haven't been good about like understanding how to fight like, words, right? Messages, words with words or whatever, right? And messaging and stuff. And so messaging has been a problem. And so I think that, if we have to take it upon ourselves, then that's where we have to push back. Like wherever we go, we speak up and you keep talking about it, and then people understand. And as a social psychologist, it's clear that like the more you repeat, the same message, then people begin to believe it's true, right? And so that's what the people that have been kind of fighting, trying to push this agenda of being quote unquote anti-DEI, is because they think that, well, eventually people will just believe it because we repeated it so many times. But I think then for people that understand the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we need to continue to say it out loud, right? And to say why this is important, because as I was saying, like the population continues to grow. Like you can't completely eliminate us, because we're here, we're not going anywhere. It's like we are already working in this industry. We are, in this population. And another thing, like because of the fact that, with our research, we talk about that people of color buy the majority of the tickets for 7 out of the 10 films. Like that has been the top films at the box office. That has been a consistent finding. So I always tell people like on social media, you are an investor. So even if you weren't in the industry and entertainment, you invest in it. So like as an investor, you should get a return on your money.
Amen. Right. Amen. And I gotta just say, that's why like these spaces are so important. Universal Studios over there, I'm like, this is my Universal Studios right here. I would love myself a DEIA conference, right? Like this is, and we have to continue to love up on each other, love up on these spaces, attend all of these programs, right? This is especially the time that we need each other. And I do have to just put a plug in for, DEI, DE and I. If you are saying that and it doesn't mean anything to you anymore, say each letter out loud, and please say the A. Yeah. It is so important, and that might help you. If you are one of these folks that just say D and I, and it was like rushes together, add that A. First of all, it's important. Speak to any accessibility advocates, right? And it is important to include that. And that will also, the same mind shift set that we're asking the studios to do to get their tax credits, we need to do as well. We need to be intersectional in our work. We need to be inclusive as well.
Yeah. And just to quickly add on, or just to quickly add on and expand to what everyone here is saying, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're breaking everything down, right? Because people hearing things in the news and the media and so forth, it begins to get crumbled and you don't understand what that actually means. And it's so important to say what it means to you, right? Not just what it means to someone else. What does it mean to you? What does it mean to women? What does it mean to people of color? What does it mean to people with disabilities? Everyone in this room has touched, is someone who is either a diverse person or knows someone in all of those categories. So what does it mean to you? So when you have conversations, when you're hearing people using it in a wrong way, right? It's up to us to make sure that you stop people and say, well, wait, let's have a conversation about that, because this is what it actually means, right? So to dispel some of those rumors, some of those myths, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're taking up those conversations and not just sitting there and letting other people have those conversations. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We could do one more question. One more. Okay.
Yes.
Speak to this, but it'd be great to hear. I think advocacy is super important, and it's not something that's really touched upon a lot within the workplaces. Because we have things like, we have training at Sony for don't be like piracy and things like that. And there's training for all these other things, but there's no training for advocacy. And I'm like, that's interesting. And I just thought, how could we do it if it's not gonna be on a corporate level? How can we do it at the state level or through the commissions or something like that? And I get the incentive programs to have it done that way, but also just to, not even if the incentive isn't there, it should still be in the back of your mind, because it makes sense, make it make sense like you all said. But how do we get our counterparts who don't look like us to kind of get that as well?
I'll just say that we, earlier this morning, there was a staff member for Senator Ben Allen as an example, right? And I'll take my CFC hat off because we, kind of can't do any lobbying on this front. But in terms of educating ourselves, we have more power than we know when we are clear with our representatives. So for example, if you don't know who your representatives are, right, your city council folks, your state senators, find out today, because the governor has proposed, increasing the tax credit, doubling it to $750 million. So the conversations are being had right now around what will the tax credit program look like once we start up, but agreed that we also, it's I think been intentional that a lot of us don't know what that process is. So I'm down when taking on my person, I will say in my personal capacity, I'm so down to get groups together and talk about how do we make sure that these laws that are being written, these policies that are being written, are the voices of us, of everybody in this room. I love that. I'll talk to you after.
Thank you all so much. I'm really I love all the panels equally, but I love you guys so much.
We
Thank
love
you so
you.
much
We
for
love
ending
you.
our day.
We love you too.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to ask one more really quick question.
Yeah.
Just to lead us into the meditation.
Well, no. We workshop. We got
We got a workshop. We're going to do some work.
Let me see that a slide. Just so if you wanted to see what we're workshopping.
Yeah. I think
There we go.
let me not change the program.
So this is my favorite. So I wanted us to have a crisis PR manager here. So instead, we're all going to be crisis PR managers together, and DEIA is our client. But yeah, and then there's a list of flagged words, because we got to, obviously, where's the line, right, of when are we going to do this work and when are we going to change the words. So let's make up some new words today together.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking our panelists.
And
Thank you.
Your question.
Alicia. Dr. Hines, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. What'd you say?
You had a question.
No, it was a quick plug for self-care. I just want to, acknowledge that the women and like you just do so much crazy work, and I wanted, you to share something you do for self-care. Like
You
how
go
you're-
first. You
how
go
you're-
first.
I'm a
'cause you
I'm a Bikram yoga practitioner. That's what I do.
Nice, yes, hot.
But yeah, I think that's helpful.
Love that.
Yeah.
Definitely meditation, praying, staying calm, speaking to my creator. Those are the things I do for self-care.
Yeah, mine is the podcast, because it's that creative piece that I don't get to do as much anymore, and doing kind of desk work, being in an office. So staying creative in a way that I get to work with the guests and with our co-hosts to determine what this looks like has been lovely.
Yeah, I think just going places with my 9-year-old and seeing, right, the joy and fun and stuff to relax.
Thank you for indulging me. All right,
No,
workshop,
love that.
sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.